Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Money in the Law here at MyFM 101.3 with Jay Marsden and John Drohan on a gorgeous Saturday morning. We've had a couple of reruns, but we're back live. So we're back live again.
We had some legit technical difficulties.
Yeah, there was.
It doesn't happen often.
Right. There was a piece of Skylab, I think, hit the station 2 weeks ago.
That's right.
Everybody was fine.
I think it was that Elon Musk rocket out of that crashed in here.
Right.
And I saw Ray driving around in a new Tesla.
I did see it. I was going to say, it's a Tesla hood ornament. That was
made a necklace out of it. Yeah.
That's a great idea. I think he has a Tesla tattoo.
I think he does. He's all about the electric. He's all about the environment.
So we had a technical difficulty, and then what was last week?
I think last week was I think everybody was busy working.
No, it was
everybody tied up.
Thing. Yeah, it was that work thing.
Client emergency, we call that in the business. It's client emergency.
we just call work.
Yep.
That's tough.
If you really want to get asked no questions, you say I was in court. That's what you say. That's the parachute right there.
I mean, I can't tell my clients I'm in court because then that's the last thing they want to hear. Well, I'm in court. What?
Yeah. Why? Hey, how can we get to reschedule that appointment? I got to go to court. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Great.
Sorry for asking. My bad. My apologies.
Let me reschedule my transfer.
Yep. Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
I mean, I know you missed me. Yeah.
I did miss you. I missed you.
I missed the show.
Yep. Yeah. We were talking pre-show. I got to tell you, we were talking pre-show about some music and if you remember, one of my resolutions this year, and it's paying off.
To become a country music fan?
No. It's paying off nicely. Less news, more music. And I will tell you right now that it's worked out. It's working out well.
You seem like you're in a better mood. You seem like
I'm in a slightly better place. I'm in a slightly better place.
You seem a little more chipper. When I bumped into you yesterday, you seemed like you were pretty, ready to engage.
Ready to engage. Yep. I didn't lead with, can you believe? Did you read that? Have you hear? Yeah, I didn't lead with that. Little music's good. It's good. How about yourself? Everybody good?
Well, just say it, all right? You know what? I know you want to talk about your music. You were talking about.
No, I'm not going to talk about it. Actually, you know what I really want to talk about?
What?
Zipping down for school vacation down to FLA next week.
That's right.
And taking the kids for a little visit with Nana.
Your assistant Sharon told me this. She
shared assistant.
For those of you who want to know what we're talking about, so Sharon actually works with me. This is Sharon. She's worked with me for a number of years. She's a wonderful person. But oftentimes Sharon will get a call, and it's crazy because Jay doesn't see it on our end. So Sharon will get a call because Jay will, for whatever reason, he has a full building in his new building over there, but no one can witness anything. It's like everybody's blind, right?
For some reason,
there's a bunch of blind people. It's like
for some reason, the way this scheduling works out, we'll be looking for a witness for a document, and nobody, for whatever reason, nobody's around.
So there's nobody around. So he needs a witness to have it when a client needs to sign a document. He needs a witness. And so, sure enough, our phone rings, and Sharon. I mean, as soon as Sharon sees your number come up, she picks it up, and she's like, "I'll be right over." And like she's like, "I gotta go." And it's almost like it's not like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm gonna go. Is it okay if I go? Is there anything you need me to do?" It's like, "I have to go, and I'll be back when I'm back." Like because everything that Jay needs is more important than anything. I mean, it trumps everything. So
we run a very desirable operation over there. A lot of people want to be part of it, right?
I know,
Many are called, few were chosen.
I know.
Right?
I mean,
that's how it works.
I never get picked.
Yep.
I never get asked to come over and do
I know. Well, you only work about a 2.5-hour day, so I can never get a hold of you.
Enough time. Yeah. Oftentimes I'm not there.
So what are we talking about today? What's on your mind?
You know what we're talking about today. You know what we're talking about. We actually did a little prep work. We talked about this. I want to talk about it because I'm experiencing it right now.
I love it. Real time.
It's funny, right? So we talk about these we talk about estate issues all the time. We talk about, look, what do you need to do? You need to plan. If you have do it now. Do it now when it's easy, when all you need to do is, everybody sits down and you figure, all right, this is what my estate plan is going to look like. This is where I want my stuff to go. Everybody, in their mind, in the back of their mind, they kind of know what they want. And it's just, you got to sit down and pull the trigger, and it's not that hard, right? So in our case right now, I have one of my dear clients, a wonderful, wonderful guy, unfortunately passed away suddenly. Did he do any estate planning? No.
He didn't get that good referral that he should have gotten.
I mean, no. He got that good referral. It's just he didn't pick up the phone
and
call that good referral.
Yes.
So, unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where he dies. without a will,
Okay.
and which is called and he will go to, correct me if I'm wrong, estate planning attorney, he will go to intestate probate?
Intestate probate.
Intestate probate,
Yep.
which means I'm going to probate without a will. Now, that's, so what does that mean? Now, let's make it up, right? Let's make it up. So this happens, and if it's simple, like if somebody passes away and they're married, and they, it's just like they've never been married before. They have no other children. They have no other like outside, prior marriages with other children or anything like that. Then usually that intestate probate will go pretty smoothly. Is that correct?
Well, it can. I mean, it can.
We'll
do a little background, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about it. But yeah, the idea of intestate probate is exactly what you just said. Somebody dies without a will, right? So they never get around to it. It just wasn't on their radar screen. And I tell clients all the time, look.
I'm sure dying isn't on every's radar screen
it's not,
either.
well,
Yeah.
sometimes it is. Sometimes, depending on how much lead time you get.
Yeah.
But what you'll say to people, I tell people all the time, look, a will is the basics, right? A will is your bare minimum. And we'll talk about it, why. But what I tell people is, look, if there's a piece of paper, now I at least have something to fight over, right? There's some indication.
Why does it have to be a fight? Why do we have to fight?
Well, because that's what lawyers like. Lawyers fight, right? But I mean,
always a fight.
But not even a fight. But I guess I would say this: in some cases, you could go and you could say, look, to avoid the fight, you can just say, look, you could be as upset as you want about whatever's kind of playing out here. But here's what I have. I have a piece of paper that was somebody's will that says this is what's supposed to happen. What that is, who knows? That's everybody's own. This is what is, right? But that at least you can go to somebody and you can say, your beef is not internal, right? Your beef isn't with your siblings anymore. Your beef is with whoever wrote that will. They made up whatever the distribution wishes are.
And that's the starting point, right? That's where it begins.
That's right. That's right. Now, without that, then there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas, right? Then there's a lot of, this is what we talked about, this was supposed to happen. This is where everybody's memory either gets crystal clear when it benefits them, or fuzzy and foggy when there's not something that's potentially going in their direction. Right.
And then we've talked about this before, where now when money's involved and kind of the sadness and the mourning part is over.
Oh, yeah.
Now when it comes to money, it's like, okay, well, it's time for everybody to move on. What am I moving on with? And that's and oftentimes that's a question that people ask. So we're going to talk about that. That's it's great stuff, and it's great when you can kind of talk about it kind of firsthand and have and you of course can see it much more than I do. But it's one of those things where I beat my clients up. I'm like, look, just do this, do, and kind of the lesson learned for our practice is so. This I've said this to this client before, and I've said it to many other clients that don't do it for whatever reason. I'm not saying it's they're lazy or sometimes there's a snag. There's something that they just can't get around, or they have to sort out, or maybe a husband and wife can't figure something out. So they kind of get stuck in that part. But regardless, it's one of those things where our lesson learned is we're going to make people do it. We're going to you got to do it. You have to do it. At least have some plan in place. And the great thing about it is you can always change it. You can always
change it. And a lot of people don't do it because they don't want to face their own mortality.
That's
right. I mean that's a little bit that's a little up in the air. It's a little bit
it's nebulous.
That's right. But and some people really feel that way. And I jokingly tell people, look, there's absolutely that's been proven to me. There's no connection between signing your will and your mortality. People think they're signing like that, like they're turning over the clock and
time.
tick, 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 tick.
It's
not what happens. Not what happens. But I'll take a quick break, then we'll come back. We'll talk a little intestate probate. So exciting. And
it is exciting.
It is very exciting.
Well, it's about the law.
Yeah.
Finally, it's estate planning about the law. So, what you'll do is you'll get involved because if it's not, you don't care.
No, that's true. Good point. Good point.
You know what? We'll be right. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to talk to him during the break. We'll be right back. I'm going to bring back a different Jay.
You'll adjust that attitude.
We'll be right back.
And we're back with Money in the Law, My FM 101.3, Jay Marsden, Marsden Law Group, John Drohan, Main Effort Financial. Christian,
what about that guy?
At the calm, keeping us handsome, keeping us skinny
Christian,
on TV.
Can I just say, so I've been spending some time with the cable access TV lately because I've been spending some. I actually got a class on how to work that camera because I am doing some video work for the middle school for their YouTube channel for the school play. So my kids in the school, both my kids are in the school play, so I'm kind of helping out with that. So
you know what that means, everybody, don't you? Come watch the Drohan show. That's all that means, right there.
That's not true.
That's exactly. Hey, were there any other kids in the play? What do you mean? I'm sorry. What kind of question? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Because on the YouTube video, there's
the 86 minutes of
Anyway, here's my point. My point is that talking to the powers that be, Lisa and Don, when they'll say, oh, by the way, are you doing a Money in the Law show? And I'll say, yep, Money in the Law is this week, and they'll say, we'll see if Christian is available. We'll see if Christian. I mean, so Christian obviously has a lot going on, like a full calendar, and so we want to thank you publicly on air. Well, actually, just between us.
Apparently, and apparently, it sounds like it's a bit of an opt-in for him, right?
I mean, it's totally like I'll do doing us a favor.
Absolutely
thank you, thank you for
abundantly clear.
Yeah, for making the time to come down because God forbid Lisa and Don come down. I'm like, well, Christian can't go. What about you? And they're like, what?
Don have to throw it in his GPS at this point. I'm not even sure he can find the station.
Don did ask, although he did ask. He goes, do you guys still do the beer review? And I was like, no.
Yeah. If the beer review is back,
that's right.
Don's back. Yep. Don will be exercising his seniority card over at HCAT. And Christian, you've had a great run, but beer review's back. You're out.
Christian's like, I can't believe I missed the beer review. It's ridiculous.
It's the whole reason I started doing this in the first place. I keep waiting for it.
That's what I heard. I was watching some of the old shows.
Well, Hetty Topper. Yeah, that's right. So, so before the break, we're talking about intestate probate. Basically, somebody passes away without a will. And I think the percentages are 51% of the population, I believe, has no will.
What do you mean? Where'd you get that stat?
I don't think I make stuff up. I'm a lawyer. Nobody makes up stuff. I'm a lawyer. I don't make stuff up like that. It's just real. 51%.
So
not
majority,
49. That's just enough.
Just enough to pass the legislation.
That's right. Just always enough. That's right. So why people don't have one, I have no idea. But they don't have them. And people will call all the time and they'll say to them, do you have anything in place? And they say, no, absolutely not. So when you die without a will, a couple of things happen. You mentioned it a minute ago. If it's a husband and wife scenario, in many cases, everything just goes to the surviving spouse by what's called, by the way, the accounts are titled, right? Yep. So that means that the accounts are joint, they own the house joint, there's named beneficiaries on IRAs and 401ks, and all that stuff doesn't go through probate, but there might be an account or an asset out there that has just one name on it.
I have a legal question.
Fire away.
I have a legal question.
No challenge.
So if I appreciate that. So if I have a joint account, joint bank account, and if both my wife and my name are on the title, the deed of our house, then does that go through probate?
No probate.
There's no probate for that, right?
Goes to the joint owner.
Right. So it goes right. So we both own it. One person dies. If I die, then everything goes to my wife.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So we're talking about the things, like you said, that are just, so if I have something just in my name, or she has something just in her name, and so what are some examples of those things?
So usually there are things like either car, so somebody's car isn't just their name for any number of reasons. There's a bank account or two. People have like a slush fund that they, this is kind of like mad money.
Vegas fund.
In
my old
money.
Right. And many guys, I used to work with was the National Guard fund.
Oh, right? Okay. Yep. There's the guard money went.
You used to have to pay to be in the National Guard.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So that happens, right? So there's, there any number of and then there's also stuff that people forget about, right? There's like a random life insurance policy that somebody got from 1,000 years ago that we joke about all the time that their friend sold them. That doesn't have a beneficiary on it, a good friend, or they don't see anymore, who's still getting a trailer on that, those things like that. So there's a couple of oddball odds and ends in those scenarios, and those would have to go through probate.
Right.
So if you don't have a will, you have to still, you have to file a petition with the probate court, and the probate court will say either this person is testate, which means they have a will, and you're going to file the will with the petition, or there's no will, and then it gets a little weird because remember, the will is your instructions to the probate court as to what you want to have happen with your stuff and who's going to be in charge of your stuff,
That's right?
And so what in many cases will happen is if you have no will, now the way your estate is handled is that it is handled according to the laws of intestacy for the state of Massachusetts. So there is a mechanism, there is a plan, but now it's not or it might
It's
not
kind
be
of like
your
it's
plan.
the default option, right?
That's
It's
right.
like-
That's
so
exactly
my default
right.
option is like, okay, so if you don't have a will, and here's your scenario, and you fit into that that particular scenario. So if, for instance, if I pass away, and my wife I don't have a will, probably my wife would become would be the one in charge.
Correct.
Of,
Without a will, there's a priority list.
Yeah.
Without a will, your wife becomes sort of first on the list to be named as your executor. Whether or not she can do the job physically or cognitively, she might have some issues. But there's a couple of it just.
So my wife could do that.
Oh yeah, she absolutely.
She's
yeah,
cognitively she can make.
She's with it.
Yeah,
She's pretty with it.
yeah.
I've met her. She's pretty with it. Yeah. But there's a couple of things. Believe it or not. Remember, in your will, there's sort of a laundry list of authority, right? And there's a laundry list of things that you can do. One of the biggest challenges, or the biggest headaches, if you will, is when somebody dies without a will. In the will somewhere is a list of these are all the things that my executor can do. And very often, there's language in there that says they can sell real estate, right? So the ability to sell somebody's house as the executor, that's a much easier path than if you don't have a will. And the reason for that is, if you have a will, the will says, yes, you, executor John, can sell my house. So when you go to the next transaction, which is to unload the house, the buyers are going to say, well, let's see, was there a will? Yes. Did the will have a power of sale in it? Did the will let this person sell the house? Yes, it did. Okay, then it's a relatively streamlined process to transfer the property, right? That's right. If you don't have a will, you have to get what's called a license to sell from the probate court.
Is that what? It's not one of those 00 licenses, though.
Not a license to kill. It's not a license to kill. It's different.
Right, so it's like a 004 license, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's the 007
license
is
to
the kill license.
I'm 004.
Yeah. Put your guns away, everybody. Put your guns away. I'm just here to transfer the property. Not shooting anybody.
All I want to do is sell a condo.
That's right. There's no models. Settle down. Everybody relax. No models. So that's right. So you have to get a license to sell. Now, it's more work. It's because
a lot of work.
Well, it is because now again you're back to this idea that everybody has to get notice. If somebody's going to complain about something, this is where the complaint is going to come in. You're letting it go for a song. It's worth more money. You have to get the court to sign off on a license to sell. It makes things more difficult.
Right.
And when people come in the front door and they say, look, somebody passed away. We have some, we need some help with the probate. First thing I say, do you have a will? No, we don't have a will. Okay. Is there real estate involved? Yes. Okay, well, guess what?
Don't plan on selling it anytime soon.
Well, you know what? That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Because here's what happens all the time. Somebody passes away, there's a piece of real estate on the property, and now all your friends are like, hey, what are you doing with the house? What are you guys doing with the Cape House? I know your mom died. It's too bad. Sorry to hear that. What are you doing with the Cape House? Furnished? Not furnished? What are you guys doing with it?
Because you know what?
Right?
Because we're looking for a Cape House.
We just happen to be looking. This happened. I can. This would help you out.
Yeah.
No broker, right?
Yep.
You haven't talked to a broker yet, right? The
No,
first thing
no,
they say, right?
no
Because they want to
need,
shave
no
that
need.
5% right off the top, right?
For sale by owner.
So now they start pushing that agenda. And then what happens all the time, and we tell clients, do not sign an offer or a purchase and sale because you're not appointed as the executor. That hasn't even happened yet. And what they do is they call me probably 4 or 5 days later and say, we just accepted an offer and we did exactly what you told us not to do. And then they say, when do I get appointed? I said, well, that's going to take some time. We got to kind of wash it through the probate process. It's okay, great. Well, you can hurry that up, right?
11 weeks,
Let me run right down to the probate court and tell them that my thing is important because nobody else's is. So that's a big issue. It always comes up with
that's one of the hard things, right? So let me ask you some other questions. So in the case of this is like kind of the simple, we kind of talked about the simple. So what if there's other players involved? So what if, let's say for instance, that this is a second marriage, right? So let's say both people, this is their second marriage, and both people have ex-spouses, right? Ex-spouses, and even better, let's say they have grown children, right?
Yep.
So they have ex-spouses and grown children. So grown children from their first marriages. So this is the we've talked about this on the show before. So this is where things get crazy, right? So you have somebody who has money, so that they kind of both bring money to the table, right?
Yep.
So both in this second relationship. And then let's say, for instance, one of the things you didn't mention, but I would think would be common, is the idea of having owning property, like from before, right?
Yep.
So let's say I inherited property like from my uncle or from my grandfather or something. Let's say I inherited a piece of property. Let's say I inherited a portion of a Cape Cod house or of a Block Island house or something like that, right? So I inherited this. And so if I inherit it, it goes to me. And even though I'm married, there's nothing that states that this is joint property unless we've specifically retitled it that way. Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
So if I don't retitle it that way, so that's something that could be that's just mine. So now if I pass away and I'm intestate probate and I have no will. And let's say I have grown children. Let's say I have 3 grown children, right? And so I have 3 grown children, and my wife, or my widow now, my wife, she has 3 grown children. So there's going to be if there's a list of property that I have. Let's say, for instance, I have this, real estate, an interest in real estate. Let's say I have cash. Let's say I have money in my own, like you mentioned, my own private bank account, right? Not retirement money, right? Retirement money is that goes out around probate because we have direct name beneficiaries. But let's say I own stuff. Let's say I collected, I don't know, exotic motorcycles or something like that.
Real estate, money at Fidelity, money at T. Rowe Price. Yeah, just
I just
stuff.
have. So let's say that and depending, especially like if it's a second marriage, people may be a little bit older, they may have accumulated more stuff. So now you're looking at potentially where, I could have, 2, 3, 4, 500, $1 million worth of property that right now has to be decided by this default intestate by the judge, the court, the probate court.
Well, and I think the issue that you raise, which is, and this comes up a lot, which is the real estate piece, right? The house piece. Because remember, using your example, the deal was, I'm going to own the house, and then if something happens to me, you can stay here. Great. Okay, great. Handshake agreement, Valentine's Day, everybody's in love, right? Looking across the table at each other through the candlelight. You can always stay here if something happens to me, right? And then they have a heart attack after eating the steak, and they're gone, and then nobody ever wrote it down.
Right.
So now, what happens? Well, when you have to go to probate court, you have to fill out a petition. And the petition says not only who do you want to be named as the probate executor for the probate, but you get to list out who's all the players, right? So you talk about the players. So now you get to list out, who's the spouse? Okay, the spouse is this person. Are there children involved? Yes, there are. There are children involved. Are the children of both the spouse and the decedent, right? So they make you tell them, look, these are kids from another marriage, or kids from a third marriage, or kids from a fourth marriage, or kids from no marriage. They make you lay out who's on the org chart because now
it's like a big family tree.
Well, that's right. That's right. And so as a surviving spouse, if you are the surviving spouse, and the kids are the kids of the marriage, if you will, everything goes to the surviving spouse. It's relatively pointed in terms of what direction it's going to go in. If you start bringing these second families together, now the pie gets cut up a little bit differently. And there's a formula, and the formula says that the surviving spouse might get, I think it's either $100,000 or $200,000, and then some percentage of the probate estate.
Right.
So if you have real estate involved, they're not going to get the whole house. They're going to get a dollar number.
And there you go. And they're living there, right?
That's
it's
right.
their house,
That's
right?
right.
And they could have been living there for 20 years.
That's exactly
right. This could be their home, like their home, and right. They've enjoyed their lives together, and now all of a sudden it's not all hers, right? It's not or not all his, right? It's not. And if there's you kind of mentioned like if there's cash involved. So if there's liquid assets involved, then potentially there's the ability to kind of buy out the other players. There's a formula way you can do it because it's based on their percentage. But let's say there isn't, right? Let's say there isn't. So now you have again, if they're amicable, that it may be fine. Like if the the children from the previous relationship are amicable with the new wife, that's fine. But oftentimes that's not the case.
Well, and even if there's not some dysfunction and there's not some animosity there, but to your point, if it's an older relationship, or if it's a relationship that developed when the kids were older, that's not stepmom.
No.
That's my husband. That's my dad's wife.
Yeah.
Right. That's who it is. It's Carol, my dad's wife.
Yeah.
They're not. They see her at the holidays and that's great. But I'll tell you, on the QT, everybody says the same thing. Look, my dad's around. She's nice, and my dad, enjoys her company, and that's great. But if my dad wasn't around, We owe her nothing.
Yeah.
She owes us nothing, and we owe her nothing. She's on her own.
Right. She
We're
has her
cutting
own
loose.
kids, she has her own family. Right.
Yep. She gets a Christmas card. That's great, but depending on that relationship, and so you're right. There may not be a willingness to do some horse trading, right? And if there's no willingness to do some horse trading, then it gets weird, right? Yeah. Now you're creating a real scenario.
Right, because if they're living in $1 million house and Carol has rights to have to 50% of it, and the other children have the rights to the other 50%, it's going to be like, okay,
That's
like
right.
this is and granted, like this doesn't happen like the day after the funeral, but there's going to, like, as time goes on, it's going to be like, well, this is this is my, I'm entitled to this. Right. I'm entitled to this because maybe it's the house I grew up in, right?
Well, and I'll tell you something. Yes, it doesn't happen at the funeral, but I can think of a handful of instances where it happened in the funeral home, right? While like the conversation went, what color tie are we going to lay this person out in? And oh, by the way, what's happening with the beach house? Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about leaving a bad taste in somebody's mouth? Ask them about what you're going to do with the beach house while you're in the funeral home casket shopping. Yeah, you want to talk about leaving a memory that someone is never going to forget? Yeah, right. There it is, right? That's what happens, right?
That's almost one of those unforgivable things.
And from a mechanical perspective, and this is something that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, which is this idea that in addition to these powers, right, the authority that the executor is going to get, there's also things that when you see a will, there's some standard language in there that says, look, I want to waive the requirement that the executor have a surety on my estate. Now, what that means is the executor, the person making the will is saying, hey, look, whoever is the executor of my estate, you don't need to go out and get insurance on my estate. You're going to do the right thing. If you don't have a will, depending on the size of the estate, the court may come in and say, well, in addition to maybe naming you as the executor, who's ever asking to be named as the executor, we want you to go out and get a bond. We want you to go out and lay out.
Right. So
So
you don't go ahead and start and have a fire sale with
so
everything.
You don't skip out of Dodge, right? So again, so now there's more work. You got to get a bond. It's expensive. That has to be renewed. That has to be paid for out of the estate assets. And then that combined with whether or not you're going to get your power of sale for the piece of property. Now you've made more administrative work for whoever ends up getting your job.
It's making me tired just thinking about it. It is. It's making me tired. All right. Speaking of tired, you're doing a much better job this segment than you did in the last segment. Nice. All right. So good job. Okay. You've improved. I mean, 150%. So keep up the good work as we head into
encouraging. Very encouraging.
Right, so on that note, on that positive, upbeat note, we're going to take a break here on Money in the Law with Jay Marsden, John Drohan, Christian from the Holliston Cable Access TV here on MyFM 101.3. We will be right back.
And we're back. Money in the Law, MyFM 101.3. Jay Marsden, Marsden Law Group, John Drohan, Main Effort Financial, Christian at the com, keeping us real. And we're talking intestate. We're talking
before
about
we jump back
please.
in. I like coming back in the break. Back to me. So the following is growing. The following is growing.
All right.
Yeah. So there are some people out there that I know that are listening.
Of course there are.
I mean, but even more. So we send out. We'll usually send out like an email blast, kind of remind everybody. So I'm getting some good feedback. I guess we could mention his name. Remember Rich Glenn?
Oh, the great Rich Glenn, the greatest 8th grade assistant basketball coach on the East Coast.
That's a word. Right. That's a word. I worked with Rich Glenn. I worked with Rich Glenn on the soccer field too.
Nice. Yeah, he's a good man.
That's right. He's a good man.
His kids are great basketball players. Yeah. He's got a wife that he absolutely does not deserve.
No, and he knows it.
Yeah, I know. He totally overshot, totally overbought. She's obviously doing him a favor, which is fine. She's the best. So God bless her.
So Glenn, he shouted out to us last week. Listen to the show. I think he listened to it in his kitchen.
Yeah, sure, I would.
God bless him.
I mean, what's more motivating, right?
God
Empty the dishwasher, make some pancakes, listen to Money in the Law. It's a weekend staple.
Right.
Now that football's over, what else are you going to do? It's a perfect replacement.
It's and the other good thing is you can always go back if you miss it. You can always go back and listen to it on the live in the media center. Right.
What I find happens. A lot of people say the same thing that happens to them when they're watching Netflix. Yeah. Because the show just stays on, it keeps going. So you wake up and you've missed 11 episodes because it just kept rolling through.
Go back.
Same thing with the show. People will put the show on, they love it so much, then they listen to it for so long, they get exhausted.
And you can watch it.
That's right.
You can also watch it on HCAT HCC. What's their website? I'm blowing it. Holliston Cable Access TV. Look it up. Google. It's on
There you
there.
go. It's on the Google?
It's on the Google.
It's on the interweb,
Google.
as my mother would say. It's on the interweb.
It's
Yep.
on that
It's good
interweb.
stuff.
All right. So back to intestate.
So back to intestate probate. So,
how do you say it? Intestate?
Intestate, yeah.
You don't say interstate.
No, that's not, because it sounds like you're on the interstate. So we don't do it that way. It's intestate.
On the interstate.
Yeah, on the interstate.
On the
Yep.
interstate.
I'm heading out of Connecticut on the interstate. To check out my client's interstate portfolio. We don't do it that way.
You know what
Interstate. Yeah,
what is this thing? Is this testate or interstate?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we don't do it that way. But it's like the revocable, irrevocable, irrevocable. It's a whole bunch of lawyers like to
You
say
speak
9
weird.
different ways.
You talk weird.
It's a lingo.
Yeah.
Yep. You charge extra for it. So the importance of having it is also, in addition to this idea of second marriages, but believe it or not, you see a lot of situations where people also say, are you married? Well, maybe. What do you mean? What do you mean maybe? What do you mean, are you married? You're not married. There's not a lot of gray area in there. I mean, that's what gets a lot of guys in trouble, right? And they say, no, we're separated. Well, Mass doesn't recognize separation. You're either married or you're not married. Well, we haven't really talked. We don't talk. I don't know where they are. We're not divorced, but we're not together. And those situations can cause a problem for all the obvious reasons, right? Something happens, and for somebody who, if we put you in a room 2 days ago, you would have punched each other's lights out because you just, that just wasn't, the relationship was just, you guys were just ready to strangle each other. Now, all of a sudden, it's boo-hoo-hoo city, right?
I missed him so much.
Yeah, we had talked about getting back together, him or her, either way, husband or wife, or ex-husband or ex-wife. So these scenarios all of a sudden show up, and everybody in the family knows the rule. Like, they all know
the story.
They absolutely know the story, right? She walked out on him, he walked out on her. They haven't talked to each other for 6 or 8 years, right? And all of a sudden, boom, there they are. And guess what? The rules are the same as if they were in true love.
That's right. Rules are the same. They just came back from their trip to Spain.
That's right. Renew their vows. It doesn't matter. They're back. She's back on the scene. He's back on the scene. We are back in love. Or you know what? I'm in love with the estate that's coming my way. Yeah. And so what? And that, there's another animosity-fueled event, because now you've got, to your point, you got this entire family dynamic, people who know what happened in the relationship and whatever the story is. Right. And now they have to watch as some portion of an estate or all of the estate goes where the person who died absolutely did not want it to go.
Well, that's right.
But they just never got around.
It could be all of the estate.
That's right.
Right?
That's
so
right.
you could be in a situation, right, where there's grown children, right?
Yep.
So let's say there's grown children that stayed with mom and were raised by mom on their own, right? Because dad walked out. And oh, by the way, they never actually finalized the divorce for whatever reason, right? For maybe it could have been just sheer laziness.
Yeah. And didn't have to. On a day-to-day basis, their lives were exactly the way they wanted their lives to be. Yep. That's right.
And here they are, and now all of a sudden, dad, who's been living with somebody for for the last 10 years, has now all of a sudden he gets everything.
Yep.
He gets everything, and there's because they're still married, and there's no. It's not like the kids, even though they're grown, it's not like they have any right to that.
That's right.
Because Massachusetts still recognizes the fact that they're married.
That's right. Now, again,
that's a pretty extreme situation, but it's not.
No, it's not. No, it's absolutely not extreme.
But it could happen.
People walk away from each other all the time, don't get divorced for any number of reasons, cost, or it was amicable and they didn't feel like they needed to. And then the further that goes without getting the divorce, the less they feel like they need it, right? So they just don't do anything, right? Here's the other thing that comes up, and when there's no will, this gets really interesting, okay? Have you ever been at like a Christmas party or a family event, and one of your relatives, maybe an aunt or an uncle, approaches you and says, "Hey, John, have you met?" Yeah. And then they drop your new cousin or your new half-cousin right in the middle of your Christmas holiday party dinner, right? That's happened. I've seen that happen. I've watched that happen.
This is
right? That's right. This is Janine. This is your uncle's fill in the blank, daughter, son, right? And you'll like scratch your head. You say to yourself, I thought uncle and aunt had 3 kids.
Yeah.
Where
I don't
did
think
this?
they had 4.
Right?
Yeah.
They didn't have 4. Oh, I'm sorry. They didn't have 4. That's like
But Uncle Fred did.
Uncle Fred had that. That's right. Uncle Fred had that trip, that business trip. That's right.
Yeah.
And that went to. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remember. You know what? I remember there was a window of time where they weren't living together. He was living in that men's hotel, like the one out of the Blues Brothers. Over. Okay,
That's right.
now it makes sense. Now I got it. That happens.
Yep.
That happens all the time.
So right, so what you're saying is there's a new family, like somebody who is a blood relative who has blood connection to, say, in this case, let's say it's the deceased, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like if you're and you're like, you have no idea. Oh yeah, I have what do you know? I have a half sister.
Yep.
And voila.
Yeah.
And now you have to. And now she's inserted into the mix and. And there's no will, right? And there's no
right.
will that
That's
says
right.
right. So a will fixes that, right? A will.
Well, a will can fix that.
A will
because,
could fix it,
That's
right.
right, because you can say, look, I want to recognize the fact that I've been married to this individual for 100 years, and we have these kids, and this is our family, and this is what we want to happen.
Yep.
And you know what? Things happen, right? People are very forgiving, and so the family might come together, or the adults might come together and say, look, I recognize that there's kind of this one-off family member here, but you know what? That was a whatever. That was the 60s. Who knows?
Yeah.
Whatever, right? It was the 70s. Things get weird. Who knows? They have a complete understanding about it, and then they say, so now they're part of the family to a certain extent. Are they in for a full 25%?
Right.
Maybe not. Right? Maybe not. But they could be. And if you don't have a will, you're not going to have a way to direct what their actual interest might be. And remember, you may be on board, but this person may be harboring some real issues about, how come I wasn't part of this family for 50 years? How come I was kind of the black sheep, blah, blah, blah. And now they don't want to play ball on some of those things that we've talked about.
Right.
You say, hey, I need you to sign this piece of paper to turn your interest in the beach house over to us because you've never
you
couldn't
know
pick
where
it.
it is.
You have
Yeah.
no idea where it is, right? You
Yeah.
didn't, no, absolutely not.
No,
Absolutely
in
not.
fact, I'll tell you what 2 weeks I'm going to be there this summer. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So again, this is really about sort of laying out who's involved, who the players are, who should get whatever they should get. We've talked about it on the show 1,000 times. Ideally, all of this happens outside of probate through a family trust that keeps all this stuff private.
There you go.
But a lot of cases, people just don't get around to setting it up. Now, here's the other issue, too. In your will, that's where you get to indicate, if I'm not around, if I have young minor children, who's going to be the guardian of my children?
Well, that's
right?
and in many cases that's could be arguably the most important thing that you
right.
put inside your will. Is who's going to, if I have minor children, who's going to take care of my kids in the unfortunate event that both I and my wife pass away.
That's right. Now, again, and we've talked about this, this is sort of a real live conversation with clients where we've said, look, who do you want to take over as guardian of your kids? I don't know who I want. Okay, well, remember, to your point from earlier, tragedy happens, emotions run high. There's situations where people say, look, I've been the worst, fill in the blank, right? Parent, in-law, not parent, grandparent, brother, sister. And you know what? My sibling is no longer with us anymore and they have young kids. This is my chance to step up and show, what
they may be earnest about it. They may they may be earnest about it, and then their brother or somebody else who's kind of involved in this scenario may be like, no way, Jack. You're not doing this because you can't do this because the only reason you're in it is because you want to have access to the inheritance money that is going to come along with the children. That's going to be part of that estate that the children are going to inherit. But because they're minors, they can't control that money.
That's right.
And you know who controls it? The guardian does.
Right. So and also it might just be fleeting.
Yeah.
They might say, right now I'm caught up in the emotion of losing my relative, and I want this is my give back. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, hey,
2 weeks later, I'm back on the road.
That's right.
I'm back
That's exactly
open
right.
Up for what's that country singer you like?
Eric Church. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, doing that whole game, right?
Jay's back on the road.
So be back on the road.
Uncle
See you
Jay's
later.
back on the road.
Yeah, good luck. Stay with your aunt. So again, those are issues, and that's where you need to sort of hash out a lot of things. And if you don't do it, don't worry. The state has a process. Everybody's hand will go up. You might not want some of those hands to go up, and they're going to say, we're the best people to take over these kids. And you know what? you may not want that. You may not want that from a geography perspective because you don't want to disrupt where the kids are.
That's right.
You may not want that from just a pure, I think they're terrible parents and I don't like the way they raise their kids and I don't want them raising my kids. I mean, there's those types of issues. And if you don't make these wishes known to the probate court, they're going to assume that you were fine letting them figure it out, right?
Because the probate court does this all day long. Like they don't care. Like they're not emotionally invested in this. No. They're going to look at it. They're going to say, all right, this makes the most on paper. These guys look the best. This is what I'm the judge. I'm going to. This is what I'm going to. This is who I think in overlooking this. This is the best case scenario.
That's right.
And your kids are moving to Lincoln, Nebraska, and there they go.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not what I want. So, how do I avoid this? How do I avoid all of this? I feel like I just woke up from a bad dream. How do I avoid this all happening? And the answer is, not only do I have a will, but I also, you mentioned it, I also have a trust. I have a trust that is going to, that is, instead of, if this be probate, here's probate, and I have a trust, and my trust goes around probate, and I don't have to deal with any of that.
No, and even if you don't, I tell clients, even if you don't fund your trust, even if we do a will, and we have a trust, and we leave everything to your trust, even if you have to go through probate. And everybody worries about avoiding probate. I mean, there are some benefits to going through probate in the sense that, there's some judicial oversight as to what's going to happen to your estate, right? So in a case where you say, I don't really have anybody that I'm comfortable, distributing these assets without somebody looking over their shoulder, it can make sense to have to go through probate because you say, look, the court's going to review what's going on, and then if something smells fishy, they're going to point it out, and they're going to say, you know what, we're not going to go with that. So there's a transparency to the probate process, which while we always try to caution people to avoid it, in some cases, it may make sense and it may be necessary, right?
Oversight might be necessary, right?
And then the other thing which is nice about probate, if you have to go through probate, is at the end of all of it, you can close the door, right? When the probate is complete, you can file a closing statement with the probate court, you can shut it down, and then that keeps anybody from showing up to say, well, you know what, maybe I'm also in the mix. So it will bring some certainty and some closure to a process that you may very well want to make sure that when this is over, it's over, and that these types of outside interlopers don't keep coming back at it.
And you do want it to be over, because at the end of the day, you want it to be over because, again, if people start, if you do nothing, then just keep going back to this. I mean,
right.
You don't want to drag this thing out, and we've said it, a zillion times. People act crazy when it comes to money. So if you can put an end to it, like wrap it up. Here it is in a box. This is how everything gets distributed. This is where everybody's going to. This is where guardianship. This is where assets go. This is what's going to happen to said beach house that we've been talking about for the last hour. This is what's going to happen. And guess what? This is what's going to happen because this is what it says is going to happen. So whether you like it or not, this is the way it's going down.
And to your point, it's not written in stone. Yeah. You can change it, right? You can change it. And if you pick your sibling or you pick your parents to be your executors, and all of a sudden they're not up to the task, there's probably a backup executor in there, and there's a process to have people taken out. When somebody says, "Look, I'm just not up to the job." We recently did an estate plan for a couple, and they had been each other's healthcare proxies and each other's powers of attorney, but they've aged, and they will tell you they're like, I don't, I'm not sure I could do the job right now. I want to be part of it. I want to be at the table, but I don't want to be having to respond to all the information that's coming in because I don't know if I want to. And they can't, physically it was hard for them to get around, so they couldn't go to the bank, they couldn't, do all the, so they just said, look, I'm going to step away. I'm going to step away, and having a will, you have that flexibility to do that and say, great, this person can decide not to be the executor, and the person who's the backup can step in. But if you don't have it, you're leaving a lot of things to chance, and you're basically running the risk that somebody's going to say, I kind of think this is what they wanted, but I'm just
it's going to be left to interpretation.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. So
the moral of the story.
The moral of the story is if you're the 51%, not the 1%.
Yeah.
If you're the 51%, think about it. Think about getting it together.
Change that percentage. Bring it back over.
That's right.
Bring it back over. Everybody.
This time next year, we want to talk about the 30%.
Yeah, right? 30%, right?
If 21% of those people come to Marsden Law, then I probably will not be here next year.
We may be doing it via satellite.
I'm going to be dialing in from down in Key West. Yeah, I'm going to be dialing in from the southern outpost.
We have Jay on a boat.
Yep. But and for all for small estates, the state does have a process for a car. The state has a somewhat streamlined process for estates that are under $25,000, right? But even if somebody comes in and says, look, and we'll do more involved planning for somebody, and we'll do wills that leave things to trusts, but we'll also do very simple wills for people that say, look, if you're not around, this is where it's going to go, because of what you mentioned earlier, which is somebody might have all their assets titled where they want them to go. Everything goes to the spouse. The kids are on the accounts. The estate, it's not about assets. It's about, if you have $1 million account at an IRA and that's your only account, there's very low probability that you end up in probate. You could have a $50,000 estate at 9 different banks in 9 separate individual accounts. That's a probate headache, right? They're going to probate, and it's work, and it's going to be work. This way, we're doing something very simple, makes sense. We'll do it, and if something needs to be more complicated, the suggestion would be, here's the best way to do it, but what does the client want to do?
Oh. All right, so on that, we're going to wrap it up.
Nice.
It's time to go.
Fantastic.
It's time to go. All right, so you can get back on the road because everybody's probably pulled over right now and just taking notes.
Yep.
So finish writing down
Update
your notes.
coffee. Yeah, get your coffee.
Finish writing down your notes. Get back on, get wherever you're going. Have a great rest of your Saturday. We will be back here next week, Saturday morning, on my FM 101.3.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I am at the dial in. I'm at the dial in.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, you may get a rerun school vacation week. We'll see.
Well, and which is always good to review. There's always it's great information to review. So so we'll be here. Whether or not we'll be here, or be here,
right?
We'll be here.
Right, we'll be here.
Right. And so we'll see you next week. Holliston Cable Access TV. Thank you again for coming.
Have a great week.
Have a great weekend. From Money in the Law, Jay Marsden, John Drohan, my FM 101.3. See you next week.
Take care.